Electric vehicles are 90% efficient, and fuel vehicles are. Do you know how efficient fuel vehicles are?
No,
Give a guess. Go for it. Come on. And if I tell you electric vehicles are 90% efficient, 90% of the energy that is in the battery gets to the wheels.
I feel like you're putting me on the spot.
I am.
Let's say 50.
50. No, you'd be wrong. It's more like 15. It's that bad.
Welcome back to another episode of Good Things with myself, Brent Lindeque, the Good Things guy. Today, I'm chatting about a topic that maybe you'll be interested in. I am. It's all about electric vehicles. Not electronic vehicles, electric vehicles. We call them EVs. And I've got the MD of GridCars, Winstone Jordaan.
Yes,
Welcome
sir.
to the show.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think before we get into EVs, can you tell us what GridCars is and sort of what it's about?
Yeah, so GridCars, it started as I'm going to just call it a project in like 2002, where we had this dream of building cars and seeing whether we can take over the market with ride sharing and all sorts of funny, crazy ideas. Sort of the intersection of the vehicle industry and IT, which is where my strong background was. And basically over a few years, we did a couple of vehicles. They went in as game viewers. We did some prototypes that went into the mines. And from there, around 2012, we realized that you either need really, really lots of money, or you've got to try and piggyback on what the other people are doing. So we decided to focus on the charging infrastructure side, and we started building the software systems and all of the things that are needed for the infrastructure to be in place for electric vehicles. And we literally started deploying that 2 years before the first EVs came into the country. So, we were certainly early. We had a lot of faith that this would happen, unlike the 23rd. But we absolutely then got very focused on building technology and really deploying the highways and building out on that to where we are today. The country's pretty well covered, in terms of where the thing. A little bit more work needed in the Northern Cape, but certainly the rest of the country, you can drive everywhere with an EV.
So, I mean, you're talking about the infrastructure. Are you talking about charging stations?
Charging stations, yep, absolutely.
Okay, I've driven an EV. So I don't even want to say lucky enough, but I went to the UK, and I think the first time I drove one was 2 years ago. We decided to book an EV because it was cheaper than fuel. So for our holiday, I mean, we were already facing the pound with the rand. We were like, let's look at an EV, and it was a really lacquer experience. There were charging stations at our hotels. There were charging stations at petrol stations. Is it that great at South Africa now? Is it that extensive that we've got that many charging stations, or are we still building to that point?
So I think, yes, we're still building. I'm always going to say we're building. I mean, that's what our business is about. But fundamentally, we've got, and on the ratio of chargers to cars, we've got more optimal ratios than even Europe. So Europe, on the ratio of chargers to cars, about 20. So 20 vehicles for one charger. In South Africa, that's around 8 or 9. So we're actually ahead of them on the charging infrastructure. Don't get your hopes up. There's not a lot of EVs, so it's not hard to compete in that game. Okay. But if we look at it, there are sufficient chargers. Yes, we will get to a time where it gets harder, and we've got to roll up that a lot faster as vehicles start getting adopted and people start moving electric more aggressively. Then yes, but I think at the same time, more people will get into that. So we are seeing a lot of the core property developers, let's just say fuel brands, property companies, these sort of people.
They're adding it in.
They're starting to get ready for this. As they know it's coming, they can see how the curves are looking, they can see where the uptake is going. They're starting to see more and more vehicles in their properties, and they're starting to realize you either manage this or you don't. And if you don't, then load shedding happens. And if you do, then suddenly you're sort of part of that game. You're part of that solution.
So I don't even want to lean towards load shedding, because I feel like right now South Africa, we're not in that space. There is load reduction, so we've got load reduction happening in the country. Because we've had load shedding in the past, many corporates, many new builds, many properties are implementing other solutions like solar. So we're sort of covered in that area in South Africa. What I want to understand, in Europe, and like when I was in the UK, there were a lot of EVs. The electric vehicles were all around us. There aren't that many electric vehicles in South Africa, as you stated, but do you feel there will be? Are we heading towards that same curve?
I'm probably overly optimistic. Absolutely, there will be. This is we're not driving electric vehicles because they're cool or because they potentially save the planet or because of all sorts of other things. That's not the reason. This is the next phase in the automotive technology. This is where we're going. This is like changing from horse-drawn carts to cars. It's that fundamental. When you see it happen, oh, that's the new technology. It's just that it's packaged very similarly, so you don't see that difference. But it's as radical because suddenly your energy, you can make it at home. You can't make fuel at home. So I plug in at night, I wake up every morning, my car is full. It's really, really
Do you
cool.
ever go to a fueling station?
No, I don't really need to. Generally, if I'm driving around Johannesburg and Pretoria where I live, I really don't have to. I've got to be doing distances more than 250 Ks before I've got to start thinking about where do I go and charge my car. And once that happens, I have an app. The app shows, it's called Charge Pocket. You can download it. You can go into guest mode. And when you open up in guest mode, you'll see all the chargers. It'll show you the map. It'll show you where they are. And basically, most of the fuel stations on the highways are starting to get chargers in place. In the cities, not as much because most people charge at home. So absolutely it's getting there. But I want to touch back on what you mentioned, load shedding. Let's get it out of the way.
Well, I mean, it's a narrative, right?
It's part of our history as a country. So firstly, load shedding does not impact EV drivers. It impacts people's perception. And that means they maybe are less likely to want to buy electric. But in general, if you think about it, I drive 150 Ks a day. And my car needs about 3 hours being plugged in order to replenish that 150 Ks at home in a slow charger on whatever connection I've got at home. 3 hours, even in the worst case of load shedding, I've got 3 hours. It's not the end of the world. Yeah. And I probably don't need to charge because I could probably do that trip twice. I could do it today and tomorrow. But, I choose every night to plug it in, that by the morning it's full. And I think that's the misconception. But as you correctly said, we're a country that have become aware of what load shedding does. So all the fuel stations on the highways, you can't pump petrol if you don't have a generator.
I didn't know that.
Didn't you know that? I mean, what happens if the power is down at the fuel site? All those things that they stick in your car has got an electric pump in it. So the electricity is pumping the petrol into your car.
I guess in its heyday,
it's logical.
in its heyday, when we suffered with, I don't know, the one year was like 300 days that we didn't have electricity. I didn't go anywhere, so I wasn't going to a fueling station. I was at home.
But the point is, you still need. So they need a generator even just to run their pumps. And yes, most of them put bigger generators in so they can run the whole site. And ultimately, we can then just leverage that as part of the charging environment. Make no mistake, there are going to be some challenges, and we are going to face those, but we've got to face them boldly. In other words, I was in a meeting recently, and somebody said, "Oh, we must just go off grid with our charging." I said, "No, we mustn't. We must fix Eskom, because if we don't fix Eskom, we're going to have bigger problems in this country."
Yeah.
So based on that, you've got to look at technologies and ways of doing things that make sense for the bigger community and for how we're going to go forward. So this is the new form of transport, without any doubt it is.
I need to ask the question because I'm sure many viewers and listeners are thinking the same thing. Price. So I said when I went to the UK that it was a good idea economically for me traveling in a different country to go, this choice that I'm making to get an EV is going to be cheaper for me than getting fuel. But you're talking about charging at home. And I know that electricity costs right now, it's a huge conversation. It's getting a little bit more expensive. Is having an EV, I don't know, affordable? Is it cost effective? Plugging it at home? Is it a good solution?
How loud can I be? Yes, absolutely. Okay, so here's the basics. At home, the cost per kilometer, let's talk about that. It's an easy way to relate. So it's cost per kilometer in fuel and cost per kilometer in electricity. Cost per kilometer on typical fuel vehicles, about R2.50 per kilometer. Cost per kilometer on the electric vehicles, about R1.10 on public charging, where I make a profit because I need to pay for all of this infrastructure I'm putting down.
Yes.
Okay, so it's about half or maybe 2/3 in a bad site, where we pay a little bit extra for electricity there. So it's roughly about 2/3 of the price of petrol. Charging at home is about 20% of the price of petrol. Charging on solar arguably as low as 10% of the price of petrol.
Wow.
So you want to get your charge in per kilometer from R2.50 down to 25 cents, just put up solar and a battery and you're in business. It radically changes the way you see your energy.
Well, it does. All of a sudden, if you're creating your own energy at home, you're able to then put that into your car. It makes the world of difference. That you'll never, I'm really sorry to the BPs and the Sassels and all the fueling stations, but you'll never visit a fueling station again unless you need something from the convenience store. Or maybe your car washed. I don't know.
Or if you're driving down to Cape Town, because then they're the most convenient locations between here and Cape Town, generally.
So that leads me into my next question, and there's a word for it, and you're going to tell me what it is, because I can't. It's when you
feel the pressure.
The pressure for you when you're driving and you're worried about the distance or the power.
They call that range anxiety.
Range anxiety.
Yeah. So this is a wonderful thing, because what range anxiety is it's a disease of people who don't drive electric vehicles, not people who drive electric vehicles. So I actually think quite hard, because I don't suffer from it. And none of the people I know who drive EVs suffer from it. It's the anticipation problem. Once you drive an EV, you understand it. There is no anticipation. You know what it is. I stopped a couple of months ago. I stopped at a site, and I just saw that I was down to 1% of my electricity, on my car. So I took a photo and I sent it to a friend of mine. So he said, "What's wrong? Why didn't you drive faster?" Because in theory, if I had 1%, I could have driven quicker, which would have consumed that 1%, and I could have arrived at zero. We know our cars, and we plan it, and we understand how that works. So range anxiety is, in all honesty, it is really a perception that people have. I had this great idea one day. I don't know if I can share this.
Please do. I love sharing ideas on my show.
So I had a great idea, and I thought what we must do is we must make them like a bright pink or a bright yellow, and we must go and put chargers all over everywhere. But these chargers will only cost 1,500 Rand, because what they'll be is just a shell. There'll be no charger inside of it. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll tell all the EV drivers the secret that says this is not a real charger. It's just there to manage people's perception, so they think there's a charger everywhere, because people don't want to buy an electric car until they see chargers everywhere, not realizing that they actually only charge at home. They never need those everywhere chargers. So if we did that, we'd get everybody buying EVs, and when you become part of the club, then we say, listen, those bright pink ones,
don't worry about them.
They're there just to convince other people to buy. Don't worry about it.
So, I mean, a great idea, maybe. I'm not putting my stamp of approval on it yet. So, I know, having a petrol car, which I've had since the day that I started driving, that there's two types of people. Maybe there's more, but in this example, I'm going to say there's two. Mm-hmm. There's the people that let their petrol get down to 1% and then fill it up to full, and there's a whole other group of people who sort of don't let it go past halfway. They sort of keep it at that space where you got your tank as half full.
So we have a name for those people, by the way, and that's called full to full and full to empty.
Is that a real...
Or empty to full.
Okay, gotcha.
So you drive to empty and then to full.
Yes.
Or you do full to full, which means you fill up whenever you can to stay close. So yes, EVs are more full to full type vehicles. Every chance you get, fill them up. Just because you don't want to waste the time. If I stop at a shopping mall and there is a charger, I'll plug in, even though it's only going to give me an extra 20 Ks. But it probably saved me 10 or 15 minutes if I'm rushing somewhere and I needed to charge and I was flatter at some point.
So I mean, that's what I was getting to, is that you do become that type of person, that you'll keep it full.
Yeah.
Maybe for someone who's watching or listening that is asking, you mentioned slow charge. So are there different types of charging stations?
Yeah.
And what does that mean with regards to time and cost?
Yeah.
I would think.
So very broadly speaking, there's two types of charging. It's called AC charging and DC charging. Some people will call them fast charging and slow charging, but then there's people who say, oh no, but there's a fast AC and there's a slow DC. And they sort of overlap with each other. So it's not quite that definitive, but slow charging generally would mean 3 to 4 hours. So it's your overnight. A big car with a big battery and a slow charger might need 10 hours. Okay, so that's sort of your worst case scenario. Whereas a fast charge is a big DC charger, though they charge a lot quicker in the vehicles, from somewhere from 20 minutes to an hour on average. You can get an hour and a half on the bigger cars and the slower ones, or a slower DC charger. The big difference though is the cost of the charger. So an AC charger, our cheapest AC charger is probably around 10 or 12,000 Rand, and our cheapest DC charger more like 300, 400,000. So there's a lot more investment needed in a DC charger than in an AC charger. And you now need to decide where is it important. So when we're going to put a charger between here and Cape Town, DC fast chargers, you don't want to sit for 3 hours at a filling station. You'd rather have that 40 minutes or an hour done, okay? When you're going to put things in your garage, no good putting a 500,000 Rand charger in your garage. You can happily sit for 8 hours waiting for your car while you're sleeping. Yeah. So you use the slow one. So they've got very clearly defined roles in the space. There are some uncertain roles in a shopping mall. So I always then say, well, is a shopping mall close to a highway? Do people come there because they're shopping, or do they come there because they want to charge? Those are the questions we must ask. Yeah. If they come there because they want to charge, then I'm likely to put a faster charger. If they come there because they're shopping and they're going to just charge by the way, then I'm likely to put a slower charger because it's just more cost effective. And over time, we'll put like at your, you've got a park area, where people are parking. Some of those should just be slow chargers that it's a convenience, because the people are not necessarily on their way to Polokwane and going to say, oh, we're going to come and stop in over here to charge. It's a bit far from the highway, and they'd rather look and say, no, let's get a fast charge at the Shell Ultra City or something like that.
So I'm smiling because when I was in the UK, the one village that we stayed in, the shopping centre only had fast charge, and it was because it was kind of the only space in the village where you could charge, and we literally parked our car, which is a great business idea for shopping centres, hashtag not sponsored, but we parked our car, and then we went off to go find a lunch spot, and we walked around for a little bit until the car was fully charged, so that we knew the next day we could get to our next space that we were going to. Yep. So there is a business model there. Yep.
So there's a little bit of creative thinking around that. How, which way are we going to go? What have we got to invest in this area? What's nearby? So again, like you say, smaller towns. Yeah, if I can,
it could be a draw card.
It could. The problem is the whole town's going to be when you switch the charger on, because from a power perspective, they pretty much draw the same power as a small town in some cases. So it could be fun, especially when you get to these new big truck chargers that can pull megawatts of power. That literally is the power of a very small town.
So you've spoken about I think you said 8-1 is the number currently in South Africa. You've spoken about slow charging, small cars, big cars, trucks. The uptake in our country, is it growing? Like, let's say
Absolutely.
year on year, is it growing?
Yeah, definitely. So it's sort of doubling every year if we look at the rate. So if we look at the number of vehicles we had in the country a year ago, more or less, about 2,500. We're probably going to end this year in 6,000. So it gives you more than double in that. So absolutely we are seeing that. There's some new brands coming in that are coming in on the low end. I think we haven't spoken about price of electric vehicles yet, so that'll
let's do that right now. I think that's an important. So yeah. I will put my hand up and I'll say when electric cars. I nearly said electronic cars.
Oh,
when electric cars, when they first got onto my radar in South Africa, there were big brands, luxury brands, who had these cars, and they were quite expensive. It was from an affordability point of view, it didn't seem like it was in.
So let's get some terminology right here first. Okay, in the past, more expensive cars are electric, not electric cars are more expensive. It's quite an important point to make.
Yes.
Okay, so I had somebody come up to me the one day and say, I had a look at these iX5 and he can't afford it. So I said, oh, okay, can you afford an X5? He said, no, hell, they're way too expensive. I said, well, please then, compare apples and apples. Because when you're comparing at that level, there is a price differential, but it's not that much. It's maybe a 10 or 20% difference. And for somebody buying a car at that level, that 10 or 20% is well justified with the saving you're going to have on energy and the niceness of driving an electric vehicle, that unbelievable acceleration. Sorry, that nice, gentle acceleration they have. And all of these things drive towards just a better vehicle technology. So paying that extra 10 or 20% at that level is really not an issue. What we are now starting to see is that cheaper cars are starting to become electric. Not electric cars are becoming cheaper. Again, please get the terminology. Yep. So we are now starting to see vehicles. There's a lovely vehicle that came in, no brands mentioned. If
you want to, you can.
They call it a BYD Surf, but coming into the market at 340,000. I'll collect my commission later, but
Let them know. Let them know. Get hold of Winston.
But so really a well-priced EV, and there are going to be more. Okay, this is the first one, and I think it's opening the market. It's making a lot of people realize now they've got to start to focus on this. So I believe that within the next year we'll see at least another 3 brands at that same price point. So in that 350,000 Rand price bracket. And that's going to be exciting because you're now getting a vehicle that performs like a GT. Okay. It's priced like a slightly more expensive than the standard vehicle, but not at the price of the GT. And I think this is the game changer that people don't realize. Electric cars are just fast by default.
Yeah.
You don't have to try very hard to make them fast. I can stick an old forklift motor into a 1992 Bantam Bucky and I'm going to get 0 to 107 seconds without even trying. One of the vehicles I did in the early days was an NP200 Nissan vehicle, and we put a 70 kilowatt electric motor in. We thought, okay, it's a little bit oversized. Twice we twisted off the prop shafts. Okay, just because it's got so much instant torque that when the vehicle is standing on the ground, you hit the accelerator and you're not shaping a curve.
Yeah.
It puts so much torque, it turns like a candy stick. It's just twisted off. So we had to really shape the curve of the acceleration to prevent it from damaging the standard components.
So you're saying it's going to become more affordable. There are going to be more options.
Absolutely.
It's coming into the country,
and they'll get into the second-hand market. That's going to make a big difference as well.
So I need to ask then, because we've spoken about the fuel versus battery and electricity and the cost. Does that fluctuate like fuel would? So fuel goes up, fuel goes down. Are we going to be in the same space when it comes to electricity?
So no, probably not. The bad news is that it's probably only going to go up because it's electricity. I mean, I haven't seen electricity coming down before, and it really goes up. But there are a couple of caveats to this. Firstly, we can lock the price of fuel for the next 20 years by just putting solar in. Because remember, that's a fixed cost now. It latches you at a level and it does not go up because that's where...
It's the sun.
It's the sun. So I think that we're going to see a very healthy mix of this over time. That healthy mix will mean that some people will pass that saving on. There is discussions with our favorite utility here in South Africa where there's a reasonable chance that they are going to be looking at a special EV rate. So in other words, so if you're charging, you'll be allowed to get a lower rate. There'll be a trade-off, and that trade-off would be they'd take control of your charger and not let you charge between 5 and 7 at night. And if you did decide you had to charge between 5 and 7, there'd be a penalty or something like that. So, and that's a fair deal because it helps Eskom again to sell electricity. Remember, if Eskom can sell electricity, they can solve their own problems. It's a game. So if we can find ways of driving that better, and we can still support them by them not charging in the wrong areas, suddenly we get all of the right technology in place.
It all sounds very positive.
Absolutely.
And I must add here like a little terms and conditions. You are part of the brand.
Yes.
You're living it. You're
Absolutely.
breathing it. You're driving it.
Yes.
So obviously you're going to be for it.
For sure.
And you've got me a little bit excited. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, but I think, but look at it in the sense that, and I think this is what I believe is missing in the market, is that the market is seeing this as a green thing, and it's not. If I want my EV to be green, I've got to do other stuff. I've got to go and put in solar. I've got to make an effort to find out when I'm charging, is the site I'm charging at fed by solar or not through solar? But if you look at it from a CO2 perspective, and I think that's quite critically important, because a lot of people say, yes, but electricity is made from coal, so it's also just as dirty. Well, not really. There's an efficiency problem. In other words, electric vehicles are 90% efficient, and fuel vehicles are. Do you know how efficient fuel vehicles are?
No.
Give a guess. Go for it. Come on. And if I tell you electric vehicles are 90% efficient, 90% of the energy that is in the battery gets to the wheels.
I feel like you're putting me on the spot.
I am.
Let's say 50.
50. No, you'd be wrong. It's more like 15. It's that bad. Wow. Fuel cars are incredibly inefficient. And based on that, if you look at the CO2 side of it, even the dirtiest electricity you can think of having in this country, compared to the cleanest fuels, we are probably half the amount of CO2. That's like the worst scenarios.
Yeah.
And most of the time we're charging on solar anyway. So then that whole scenario just gets nullified.
So it is a good thing.
It's a
what
good
you're
thing.
Telling me.
It's a good thing by default.
Yes.
You can make a bigger effort to get it in. This is the next of technology. If I was a different person, I'd be very worried about the fact that I might not actually be able to sell my fuel car in about 3 or 4 years' time.
I mean, don't stress the listeners.
No, I do need to stress the listeners because this is something we're not facing.
Yeah.
So they call it stranded assets. It's going to get to the point where nobody's going to want your fuel car because electric cars will be cheaper than fuel cars. Because remember, right now, the only reason fuel cars are cheaper is we sell more of them.
Yes.
So worldwide, 80% of cars sold are fuel cars and 20% are electric. And that differential means that fuel cars have the volume on their side. And volume on their side means they get volume on purchasing, they get volume on scale, they get all of those things. And their prices are competitive. EVs haven't yet got that level. We are going to pass the halfway point worldwide. We will pass the halfway point within 4 years.
Do you believe
I know that? No, we will. I do believe that. And you can go and look at the numbers. The predictions that the guys have been doing for the last 4 or 5 years have been spot on. And the curve, if you look at the curve, 4 years' time, we're going to pass halfway. By 2032, 2034, we should be up at the 90% point. 90% of new cars, not all cars, new cars will be electric. When that happens, the petrol vehicles lose the majority and their prices start spiking because now you're not making the right numbers of volumes. So we're going to see a big turnaround. That turnaround, I think, is going to almost be like a cliff. It'll happen for most people over a year or two of their lives. Now, where that year or two is in South Africa, we can argue. I'd optimistically think it's around 2028, okay, maybe 2029. Pessimistically, 2033. That's sort of the thing. So we can debate that and where that might be. But when that pivots, you're going to realize what I've realized, lots of my friends that haven't quite believed yet, they haven't drank the Kool-Aid. So
I love that you said that because you can see you're living the brand. You can see it.
But the idea is that they haven't really bought into it. But most of them are now saying, but I won't buy another petrol car. So for the next 3 or 4 years, they're just going to stick with what they have. So the fossil fuel sale has already been lost.
Yeah.
You haven't yet achieved the EV purchase, but you've lost the fossil fuel purchase. Those guys are delaying their purchases. It's a principle called the Osborne effect. Listeners can go out there and read about it. It's phenomenal to understand it. But basically, it was defined when the transition from black and white to color TVs happened. And massive numbers of companies went out of business, and they had warehouses full of black and white TVs that people were just saying, well, we're not going to buy one now. We'll wait until we can afford the color one. And suddenly it became a problem, and they had to write off that stock.
How interesting.
So I think we're going to see a time where that will become very, very interesting in this country.
I think this is a space that we need to watch, and I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens in the vehicle space in South Africa. If people want more information from you, Winston, where do they go?
Well, I think I'm fairly visible on the internet. If you just Google Winston, you're likely to find my email and phone number quite easily. It's not that hard. But really, go and have a look at GridCars website. You know, we do put some of the information out there on that. We do try to cover it as much as we can. And every now and again, we get to come and speak to somebody like yourself on a great podcast. But the idea is that listen to the people who know what they're talking about. Yep. Always understand there's a lot of people out there that still have a strong vested interest in the status quo remaining where it is, or they just don't understand how quickly that will change. You know, I've had people say to me, but fuel stations, you know, what are they going to do? And you implied it a little bit earlier. And actually, if you think back, now I can think back a lot further than you can, but so if I go back to when I was a kid in the sort of 70s and 80s, you know, a fuel station was a place the size of a double garage that served petrol and repaired the vehicles. And also, they definitely didn't sell bread and coffee. Okay, so that was what a fuel station looked like. Where we are today, you would never in that time have believed that sort of fuel station would look like. They are mini strip malls. You understand? There are no repairs on cars. In fact, it's even hard to get them to fix a puncture on a car nowadays at a typical fuel station. So they have pivoted massively, and that's only over a 30-year period. The bottom line is, over the next 10 or 20 or 30 years, they will pivot again. And that pivot will be, they'll become more of a strip mall.
Yeah.
And they will start to do charging, and they will start to be energy hubs, and they'll start to become meeting places where you can go and stop for a half an hour charge and have a meeting with somebody, and, you know, or sit down and catch up on your emails. They will pivot to this new end thing. They won't just disappear. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, a percentage of them will disappear. But a big percentage of them will just pivot into the new technology. It's not as bad as people think.
I think Winston's given us a lot of things to think about, a lot of advice If you're a different business, if you're a fueling station, if, I don't know, you want to put a charging station in your shopping
Come
center.
talk to us.
That's who you speak to. I don't know if EVs are the future. I've driven them before. If it is, I'm excited. I enjoy driving my EV. What do you think? How do you feel? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe, share, do all those things. Winston, it's been great having you on the show today.
Absolutely, be wonderful.
To all of the viewers and the listeners, I want to wish you only good things. Okay, love you, bye.
Cheers.